Hello world of YouTube and welcome to the listening log update for August of 2023. I have 14 releases I'm going to be talking about in this video. 8 studio albums, 2 soundtracks, and 4 EPs. As always, timecodes are listed in the description. There are a couple of requests that I still have on my backlog that I've yet to get to. I apologize to those that have been waiting to hear my thoughts, but I did fulfill one kind of request that was sent to me, along with a handful of releases that I was incredibly hyped to spin, and a couple backlog releases and surprises that dropped throughout August that I also was happy to see. Either way, like I said, timecode's in the description. Give it a like if you're excited. Let's go ahead and get started.
Feel like I'm in Bugalo 49. I never want to mistreat a lady. I've been seeing them.
Queef Jerky, the creative culmination of Dev Lemons and Ethan is Online with some Nick is Not Green. Queef Underground is the album. I had heard Pineapple Upside Down getting some buzz on my For You page, and I really like the song. It's sort of a good showcasing of what the project has to offer as far as, like, some pretty out there production ideas, a sort of lo-fi touch that feels very reminiscent of, like, JPEG Mafia, a sort of sense of non-sincerity in a lot of the lyrical style and the stream of consciousness style of lyrics, and doesn't take itself too seriously, a la, like, an album like 10,000 Gex. But unlike an album like 10,000 Gex, which I still get a lot of regular rotation out of, and I would say is one of the best albums of the year, this album kind of gives me a sense of more diminishing returns. You know, there's still some tracks that I do like outside of Pineapple Upside Down, and I like some of the moments that the album reaches both lyrically and sonically. I think there's some cool ideas in the pot. Again, I like the beat of Pineapple Upside Down on top of the weird lyrical turns that they sort of pull together. I love the meltdown in the second half of the chorus, or during the second chorus of that song. It has a real intensity that I kind of wish the album had more going on in doses. I love the laid-back atmospheres of tracks like Eminem Type Feet and Bungalow 49. Hell, the sampling of Resi 4, the beginning of Underground, already made it one of my favorite moments on the record as a whole, but the rest of the beat with its synth choices adds to that sort of atmosphere that a Resi 4 sample would evoke. Outside of a track like Underground, where the Adam Driver bit kind of stays pretty funny to me, it's really dumb, but I love it. And I think that while Meaty Fun starts with easily one of the best lines on the album of 9/11 wasn't an inside job, it happened outside, it at least carries that sort of humor pretty good throughout the track. But I think tracks like Eminem Type Feet, Family Guy, and Spaghetti Noodles in a Can, lyrically, nothing for me, honestly. Especially on revisits, they just kind of became immediate skips lyric-wise. I just don't think that they have a whole lot that I thought was great.
I know that part of that is super subjective, and that's like the weird thing about talking about comedy music or music that's like not at all serious in like a critical sense, because there's elements of this that I think really work in like a critical sense as like good shit. And the vibe I totally get, even on the tracks I don't like as much as others, that I don't spin as much in full, like Eminem Type Feet and Family Guy. It's more the front half of those songs. The back half of those songs is a lot better. I like the Goblin Mode shit on Eminem Type Feet. It's fine, but like the back half of that song is much better. Like the bit with Nick on that chill beat that like evolves when Dev Lemons comes in. That's a cool bit. Family Guy, it's mostly because I don't give a shit about Family Guy. I haven't in so long. But the second half of that track is really fucking cool. The production in general sounds pretty fucking choice. And Bungalow 49 is just a moment where the weirdness doesn't hit me in the same way as it does other tracks.
It's a pretty solid record, all things considered, though. I think that a lot of the instrumental stuff, I think, is more interesting than where they lyrically sort of take the piss, as it were. I feel like if you enjoy music that doesn't take itself too seriously, you'll still find a lot of enjoyment out of Queef Underground, and I think that it's a really solid prospect for these guys to sort of come together with. I give this a 6. It's really fucking solid. Wanted a little more out of it, thought it kind of gave me some diminishing returns a little bit, but sonically, there's some pretty compelling stuff on here, and again, lyrically, there's also some pretty funny stuff at the end of the day. Now, while I'm using the most recent album, Praise the Lord to Choose, but which does not consume or simply hop between worlds, as my real jumping on point to Yves Tumor's music, I've had sort of a mild interest in what they've got going on since I heard what sort of sonic ideas they brought to Joji's Nectar. And while I missed their 2020 album in particular, Heaven is a Tortured Mind, I figured if I was going to give them a shot, this would be the best option, it would be the best time to do so. And I gotta say, after spinning this, I'm very much intrigued in their back catalog because I love the sonic palette of this project. I like the sort of juggling of sort of psychedelic ideas with some post-rock and very synth-driven soundscapes, and I think that Yves Tumor strikes a really good balance, at least sonically especially. There's some cool moments where the energy sort of reaches a really good crescendo and there's a good climax or a good sort of huge opening of the sounds, like on Meteor Blues, which is easily my favorite cut on the record.
Like, I think there's a genuine potential for a track like Meteor Blues to get some circulation in some of the circles of rock fans, because the overall flourishing of the guitars on that and how it sort of comes in from that acoustic intro is fantastic. The production of that song is great. The lyrical turns of phrase on it are cheeky and have this sense of lust within them that I think matches the guitar tone so fantastically.
Or on Heaven Surrounds Us Like a Hood, where I feel like they really reach those scales that I feel like bands that I love like Kyra and Earsay reach time and time again on their respective projects. I love the kinetic synthetics on Lovely Sewer and In Spite of War. I love the bass production on Fear Evil Like Fire. I love that the album also juggles these ideas of a sort of toxic relationship with one's own faith and sort of a reevaluation of that through one's own self-discovery. You know, that's shown really well on the opener God is a Circle and kind of crops up brilliantly on tracks like In Spite of War and Fear Evil Like Fire, which sort of add to this sort of untrusting nature that a lot of the lyrics sort of have permeating throughout them. I also like how on a track like Parody they sort of deconstruct the duality of being somebody in the public eye in a popular sense. There's this sort of through line of connecting one's own conflict of faith with new relationships as well, like on Heaven Surrounds Us Like a Hood, that I think help tie those themes together incredibly well. You know, Echo Alley almost feels like the prelude to a lot of the themes on here, and it makes sense that that was the lead single. I also really love the bass production on that, and I feel like that, coming late in the record, sort of reaffirms one's own internal plight that they hope to seek with God, and the overall lack of obtaining that through one's own time with faith. I really love when artists find a way to lyrically bring their own struggles to light in a variety of ways, and I feel like Yves Tumor on here does a really good job at harmonizing a lot of the lyrical through lines with a super compelling and interesting sonic palette that makes this easily one of my favorite albums I've spun this year. I'm going to be giving it an 8. It probably won't end up in my top 10, just because this year has been so stacked, but I could see it ending up somewhere on my top 20 easily.
Baby, you're so fine, you got my mind. Jump into the driver's seat and put it into speed drive.
Now, I did see Barbie in theaters, but I won't be talking about the movie in solidarity with the strikes that have still been going on. I will talk about the soundtrack, though, because it was hyped up as much as the movie in the pockets of the internet that I had seen, and it's got a lot of the people I would kind of expect to see on a pop album for a Barbie movie soundtrack. You know, you got Dua Lipa in here with a really strong single. I like Dance the Night Away. I think it's a really catchy song that sort of extends the sonic palette of future nostalgia pretty well. I expected to see Lizzo on here. I didn't expect it to be the track that it was, but again, similarly to Dua Lipa, it sort of extends her own sonic palette from Special pretty well, in my opinion. I expected to see Tame Impala on here, and his sort of interlude style track I think adds a lot to the sonic palette that this album plays with. Sort of acts as a good sort of moment in its own regard, even if it's not anything I would say is super special. I also expected to see artists like Kid Laroi and Billie Eilish on here. I really like Billie Eilish's contributions on here as well. I think that, again, similarly to what I've talked about, it extends Happily Ever After sort of melodramatic grandness into a good introspection that I think is really poignant for an artist like Billie to be dropping, especially given that she sort of came up and was already kind of put on display in a myriad of ways that I feel like an artist, especially as young as she has been, could be a lot to go through. I wasn't expecting to see Charlie XCX on here, and even though Speed Drive is such a small song, I loved seeing it because I love me some Charlie XCX. And I think it's, again, if we're talking about pop stars that should be on the Barbie soundtrack, Charlie XCX is a good grab, and especially given post-Crash with her sort of by-the-books, pop-ass pop album,
it was cool to see her do this bright, flashy, quick in and out pop song that channeled some old pop energy with its "Oh Mickey" flip in the chorus.
I also love seeing Haim on here. I love seeing those three crop up in a lot of pop culture, and I think that Home adds a sort of good emotional grounding that a track like Billie Eilish's also does. I also like that they put I'm Just Ken on here. I kind of wish they put the Matchbox 20 cover on this, but I think that if they're going to put one of the two Ryan Gosling songs, I'm Just Ken is a decent one to put on here. And while new artists like Ice Spice and Pink Panthers also kind of felt like gimmies for a soundtrack like this, they add some pretty good contributions. I think that having the credit song be the song that samples Barbie Girl was a very good artistic choice. The song itself is fine. I think that the sampling of that Red Hot Chili Peppers song in Butterflies, the Gale track, was a wild choice, but was also kind of an interesting surprise. Sure, there's a handful of cuts on here that I could take or leave. I don't really care about the Sam Smith song, I don't really care about the Ava Max song, and I don't really care about the Dominic Fike song. While we're talking sort of homogenizing the worlds of the movie and the soundtrack, tracks like the Sam Smith track and the Lizard tracks definitely serve that sort of purpose, along with including stuff like the I'm Just Ken. And just some of those elements could have done without, or just don't think add as much to the soundtrack as others, in my opinion. That's the thing with a soundtrack like this. I'm going to have a handful of cuts that I really enjoy, but ultimately, the project as a whole isn't as good as the sum of its parts, in my opinion. I liked the movie more than I liked the soundtrack. I will say that. I'm giving the soundtrack a 6. It's got some good songs, it's got some good ideas, it's got some interesting ideas in there as well, but by the by, I wouldn't say I'd spin this thing in full all that often. Skindred finally followed up what I would argue was kind of a disappointing sidestep Big Tings into a step back into their own foundations and re-exploring those on Smile, a prospect that doesn't abandon some of the pivots they explored on Big Tings, but finds better ways to integrate them into their own brand of reggae metal. You know, it opens with 3 bangers in Our Religion, Give It That Boom, and Set Phasers. 3 tracks that are very primal in their delivery, with production that enhances that primal nature tenfold.
I will say, while those 3 bangers kick the album off on a really good, intense foot that leads really well into Life That's Free, I do think Give Me That Boom is probably the weakest of the 3. It's sort of a middle piece that has this very amped up confrontational energy. It's got that break stuff core really harnessed in. I just think that the genre is personally done better. That drum production does help immensely, though, because those drums sound thunderous.
The drop on Our Religion is fucking huge, and I think kicks the album off in grand splendor, with an intensity still felt on Life That's Free, but seeing it pivot more into the realms explored on records like Shark Bites and Dog Fights. And Black Stars is sort of stomp clap percussion, adding to the sort of anthemic energy that they channel in different facets. You know, they use kids' vocals on there, and on Love Smile Please, a track that sees them dipping more heavy-handedly into their reggae influence, which I always really love to see. But I'll be honest, that song's follow-up, Disappointed Love, that blends that reggae with that metal a little more fluidly, I enjoy a hell of a lot more. I dig the sentiment of Love Smile Please, but it's very much in the realms of like the where is the love campiness that I feel like it's trying to hit that emotional, humanistic core. It just kind of goes a little too heavy-handedly with it. And if we're talking about other tracks that I don't really enjoy from here, I think that State of the Union's sort of funky adjacent energy, while I'm all about some good funk, I just think that they could really take that into a better realm, especially with the production. The guitar production on that track in particular, I feel like is neutered compared to some of the moments on the record where it really shines. I also think that the all-out grandness of a chorus like If I Could did nothing for me. While I think the album definitely comes back around in itself on creating good anthemic big tracks like Unstoppable the Closer and some real heartfelt moments like Mama, the whole middle portion of the album, I feel like, is the spottiest point on this project. It's still a step above Big Tings, in my opinion, but I still don't think it's up there with, like, Kill the Power or Union Black as one of my favorite Skindred records. I'm giving it a 6. I think that it's very, very solid, and I think that, again, as far as reevaluating one's own foundations, this is a pretty solid job at doing so. And I'm glad to see them find ways to integrate those experiments a little more seamlessly into their own sound.
We're blowing up tonight. I say, we're blowing up tonight.
Now, back in January, I heavily criticized one Maneskin's Rush for being a sterile, lifeless, vapid, rock-ass rock album that had no substance to be seen. While this return of the Swedish rock aughts icons, the Hives, the death of Randy Fitzsimmons, also has a lot of those elements as far as being a no-frills, cut-the-shit, rock-ass rock album that's meant to be just a bunch of fun rock tunes with some great riff work, fun bass play, and anthemic drum play. This does that infinitely better and reaffirms why they were such a fun band to listen to in the 2000s. I like the Hives. I think they're a pretty solid fucking rock band. I don't think that they have anything super profound that they bring to the table as far as, like, really writing some emotional core striking shit, and that was kind of the MO with this project. While it's called The Death of Jimmy Fitzsimmons, that's supposed to be sort of like a joke to some degree, because Jimmy Fitzsimmons isn't a real person. And the album itself has that same grand platitudes, production-wise, that they were championing in their heyday, and just feels like them taking another step without having missed a beat. I really like this thing. I think there's some quality-ass rock tunes. Between the opener, Bogus Operandi, which just feels like the barn-burning I'm Back Bitch song that has this kineticism that they continue bringing back to the table on tracks like Countdown to Shut Down, The Way the Story Goes, and The Bomb. Or even when they slow it down and get swanky, like on Rigor Mortis Radio or What Did I Ever Do to You. They keep the listener going with a really good sequencing on here. Sure, some songs are kind of in and out, a little too fast in my opinion, but there isn't a track on here that I would say is bad. Lyrically, similarly to everything else they've done, it just kind of fits their MO. A lot of fun tracks. While they lean into that death aspect that the title evokes in some components, like in some of the song titles like Rigor Mortis Radio, I feel like the whole looking at death sort of thing is again, sort of just an ironic jab. And I don't think it's a jab at any particular band. It's just the Hives being the Hives. Further proving that Time Spent Away has done nothing to kneecap these guys' talent. I think that this is a really strong rock album, and I feel like if you like just well-produced, fun rock music, it is a solid place to go. I'm going to give this an 8. I think it's pretty damn good, and I could see myself keeping this in my rotation when I'm wanting some good, fun rock music. Now, I'm no stranger to mashup culture on this channel. I've talked about a handful of mashup projects, both on this segment and on other parts of the channel. And Shake sent me Psynwave's most recent mashup album, Musical Tangents, which does a lot of things that I see a lot of modern mashup albums doing, as far as, like, bringing some modern memes in with some fun niche stuff and some ideas that just generally should have come across at some point in mashup culture, and it's amazing that it's only happening now, into this project that I think is super fucking awesome. Well, I'll be honest, I think that it opens and closes on probably the weakest tracks. I don't think that Industry Victory is a terrible idea and a terrible song. In fact, I really like the mashing up of Industry Baby with Sweet Victory from SpongeBob. And We Don't Make Meme Mashups just kind of feels like the we've got to do this track on the project. It would have been cool for it to be not the closer, but it kind of makes sense in a record like this. The brilliance of this record comes in some of those other aspects that I talked about in the intro, of sort of ideas that it feels like should have already happened in mashup culture, and it's wild that it hasn't. Like A Window to the Wall, which brings together Another Brick in the Wall with Get Low by Lil Jon and the East Side Boys, with a little bit of Matilda, the musical, play also thrown up in the back end of that song, which leans into the more sort of contemporary meme stuff that mashup records do sometimes. Or Higher Than the Empire State sort of being this culmination of a piss take on one line from Fun's We Are Young, and brings the sort of intro drums with that, with maps and a little bit of dark fantasy. Love to accent that getting higher than the Empire State. Or even Right Sins You Used to Know, which brings together Somebody That I Used to Know by Gautier and I Write Sins Not Tragedies by Panic at the Disco, while it culminates to another party rock anthem joke, which I think falls a little flat in comparison to the rest of the track. It's not ruined by its end, and honestly isn't the worst thing on the project. It also does that hyper niche stuff so excellently, like on Mad Taxi, a bringing together of All I Want by The Offspring and Mad City by Kendrick to sort of cement a mashup that lives in the world of Crazy Taxi. It's incredible.
Complete with a moment where an impersonator talks like the Crazy Taxi announcer and does the hook from Mad City. It's fantastic.
Or A Bite of the Pizzeria, which acts as sort of a FNAF mashup by bringing together I Want to Dance with Somebody with Michael Jackson's vocals on Thriller and Somebody's Watching Me, while adding a little bit of Purple People Eater in there. There's a lot of elements to that track that sort of culminate to a great tribute to FNAF, in my opinion.
And there are these two songs that kind of go the distance in getting weird with it in a very specific way. And I'm mostly talking I Wanna and Can't Feel Our House. I Wanna being this sort of POV from a baby's brain. It mashes like Wannabe with Baby Shark, and then it just evolves into this like madness that throws in like these random punchlines of like mashing up Salt and Peppa's Push It with the Rugrats theme. It's got some Ponda Laser. It's got like a little Americano, but it's all to culminate to just babies. And Can't Feel Our House being probably my favorite song on the project, being a bringing together of Can't Feel My Face by The Weeknd with Down Under by Men at Work, and Madness is Our House. It's got a weird tribute bridge, but they make it work. It's just fucking weird. It's about not going to the house in the middle of our street that is our house. It's weird, but I'm here for it.
Hell, even if I think some modern meme stuff can fall flat with some of these mashup records, with Happy Hour, which just brings together Tequila and Happy before bringing in that fucking Hudson Mohawk track that was memed last year. I like this project by and large. When this project shines, it's pretty fucking choice. And I would say, out of the mashup albums I've heard this year, this is easily the strongest so far. I'm giving it an 8 out of 10 because it's really fucking good. Some of the ideas I kind of wish were a little bit longer, but everything kind of fits together pretty snugly. And I feel like if you're a fan of piss take mashup projects, you should really give Musical Tangents a spin.
Caged by the darkness.
My buddy John sent me this little 4-track EP by the band Maruja. A lot of these components create a pretty good sort of taste of what this group could offer as a band. You know, it's got really good drum work and sax play where the two kind of have this interlinked relationship. Blind Spot and Tinker in particular have these two moments where they just coalesce into these meltdowns that I think are really fucking choice. The opener, Thunder, has this sort of spoken word style vocals that kind of reminded me of Black Country New Road's first album, with these guitars that kind of set this more bleak tone that the band just uses to devolve into madness as the song goes on. While the closer, Kakistocracy, also has those vocals in check and has this slow burn approach to his song composition that I think the group also plays pretty well. And all in all, I think this is pretty damn good. The production that they went with on here helps accent a lot of both their talents and set a mood that it feels like they're tapping into lyrically. They really reach a good emotional intensity that has this palpable energy to it that keeps me coming back. As far as like, similarly to a project I'll talk about here shortly, leaving me wanting more, this definitely also satiated my appetite. But unlike the other instance that I'll talk about in this video, this had a decent amount of substance that I still found myself enjoying to revisit as far as capturing my imagination with a good batch of tracks. I'm giving this an 8. Is pretty fucking choice. I feel like if you enjoy good, moody music with some nice sax playing against some fantastic drums, this is a good place to go in my opinion. In the wake of the death of Every Time I Die, a lot of those guys and Will Putney came together with former Dillinger frontman Greg Puciato and dropped an EP under the pseudonym Better Lovers, God Made Me an Animal. A project that John also sent me the lead single of 30 Under 30. I fucking love that song. Beats the fuck out of the listener with this great guitar work and Greg's sharp vocals just cutting through the mix. And I think that this EP as a whole acts as a good proof of concept to what these guys can really cook together. I'm also just really happy to see Greg with a band like this again, because I think Every Time I Die's musical, intensity doesn't quite match the complexity at moments that Dillinger's Escape Plan reached, but I think they do have this musicianship to them that gets heavy. And plus, both bands had moments where they didn't really take themselves too seriously, so I feel like there's some chemistry that could be seen flourished out there into more stuff. I think that the bass stuff on Because So Small is produced so well. The way the EP just starts with a razor-sharp opener of Sacrificial Participant helps put the listener into the front seat of the madness. I think that the title track also has some really good guitar work in there. The lead riff of that is pretty fucking choice, and I think that by and large, the band is still tight, the band still got it, and the other members that aren't from Every Time I Die fit this group like a glove. Similarly to some of the other EPs, obviously I kind of wish there was a little more brought to the table here, but similarly to that Maruja EP, I think that this is a good presentation of what this group could bring to the table in a full-fledged experience like a great EP does. I'm giving this an 8. I really fucking like this, and I hope that there is a lot more to this group. Now I'm going to be talking about this game at some point later on in the year, obviously. I've been gassed up for Bomb Rush Cyberfunk for years at this point, and now that it's finally here, I have beaten it, and its soundtrack is so fucking good. While not quite the same as the soundtracks for Jet Set Radio and Jet Set Radio Future as far as, like, bringing in very in-the-now artists and putting them on display, it actually digs up some gems throughout the 2010s while bringing in some people like Hideki Naganuma to craft some new gems for it into creating another really good soundtrack for you to skate around and graffiti shit with. The Hideki stuff like Jack to Funk and Get Enough, it was stuff that was immediately embedded in my brain and reaffirms why Hideki is just one of the GOATs in this lane when tapping into a very niche thing.
In the original filming, I meant to talk about Don McLennan, formerly of Brockhampton's track Morning Glow. I think that it is a really nicely produced beat. I think that it also fits the energy really well, and I'm also glad to see him get work post-Brockhampton.
And I like how they do fit some of those other tracks into the world as it was, like Light Switch, which acts as the hangout track for this game, and I like that they actually got like a rapper to rap on that track, given that was something I did on the hangout song for Jet Set Radio 1.
I'm the best that I've been in a minute, spitting meta text, aiming to finish the vision.
But they also brought in a handful of cuts from other artists that either feel very indebted and also at some parts of the group paid tribute to Jet Set Radio, like Too Mellow with I Wanna Know, which is a really good track by that artist that, again, just feels snug within this aesthetic. In the Pocket, the main menu theme is a track that I would honestly just have on. I just have the main menu on and I would just hang out and do stuff to it because it's just pretty fucking choice. It's a nice little laid-back, vibey groove. I like that they also get in touch with more of the electronics inspiration that coded the Jet Set Radio Future soundtrack. Tracks like Spectre's Rezo and Hair Done, Nails Done by Color Plus have this sort of in-the-club energy that helps break up and spice up the pacing of some of the tracks on here. And if we're talking about tracks that are gems from their era that should have been bigger than they were when they dropped, You Can Say Hi is a track that should have been one of the biggest songs of 2013, in my opinion. It's a great jam and a surefire bop that I kept heavily on my rotation while I played the game. Because I found the song in the wild, and one of the features of that game is you can keep adding songs to your queue, essentially, and that's one that I would keep in heavier rotation. It's just a really well done, great song. I love the soundtrack. I think that as far as capturing the aesthetic that made Jet Set Radio and Jet Set Radio Future so interesting to people like me. This does so tenfold, even if it's in a different way than those games did. I'm still giving this a 9.
That's to say, like, while there are some original compositions and there are songs from other artists, the, like, remix side that was, like, all over both those soundtracks is here, but it's in a different flavor.
I fucking love this album, and I love this game. If there's one thing you pull from me this year, and in this video, or anything I talk about, go buy Bomb Rush Cyberfunk. It's very much worth your time.
The moon slips away. The moon slips away.
My buddy Ricky actually sent me this new Daily Bread album, Invisible Cinema. He's a DJ from Atlanta, and the best way I could kind of actually describe his sound is that there's parts of this that I feel like would fit snugly in the world of like Bomb Rush, Cyberfunk, and Jet Set Radio. He does have moments where he leans more into like the electronic, almost dubstep-inspired atmospheres, but by and large, he's pulling together just a laid-back beat with some chopped-up samples and maybe some vocalists thrown into the fray as well. You know, there's this string sample flipping on the opener, Blindfold Yourself, that I think does a good job at bringing the listener into the fray of what his ideas are going to be, with some fun electronic weaving amidst that, but doesn't quite go the full 9 like it does on other parts of the project. You know, the Chipmunk Soul stuff on Street's Treasure, I think comes together into a pretty solid beat. The turntable scratching and flipping on Close Encounters also kind of embodies that laid-back hip-hop energy that he champions on pockets of this, while having tracks like the Moon 2 for a Back to the Moon and Moon Slips Away, which integrate more intense electronics in there to kind of spice it up a little bit. I love that there is this nice refrain on Moon Slips Away with its sample when the beat drops away. The sort of scratched vocal play with that beat construction on tracks like Close Encounter and Empty Like Sky sort of round out some of those hip-hop ideas into a bubble that, again, kind of feels adjacent to where, like, Jet Set Radio sits in a really nice way. I think my biggest issue with this project is that a handful of the tracks, I think, kind of overuse some of those production ideas or don't really deviate into anywhere that I think is all that compelling. I really don't like the pass filter usage on Weary Days. It kind of rivals what I thought the Avalanche's comeback album Wildflower had going on in some parts of that project. And that problem also kind of arises in the beat construction of Storm Clouds Rising. I think the features that come in on that track are pretty solid, but I think that that's another example of just those production ideas just kind of kneecapping what's a decent song at the end of the day. I don't think all the components of Snickers come together as homogeneously as they do on other tracks where he's kind of flipping his own proverbial script in the runtime. And while I like the beat construction and sample flipping on other parts of the record, and again, I don't think Jonah Cruz is necessarily bad on applying pressure, I just don't think that song kind of meets the same mark as other parts of the record aims for. It's a little too... The tracks like that kind of beef out the runtime and kind of fill it out in a way that I just don't think is all that gratifying. It's still a pretty solid record. I like a lot of this. I actually think that there's a couple of tracks on here I could see myself putting into playlists in the future as far as like sustaining a mood and keeping a listener, you know, engaged with what songs are kind of pulled together. But this is all right. I give this like a 7. It's really solid. I like some of the production ideas, but I think it goes a little too far in other instances with them. When TWRP dropped Have You Heard earlier this year, I was curious at the prospect of a new TWRP album because they've been on a really good hot streak, in my opinion, with great, if not fantastic, record after record. But with Friends of the Blues, we see them pivoting into a realm they haven't really dabbled in for a while, and that's the EP circuit, with a nice little 4-track EP that has a lot of really good tunes on there that feel like the sort of casting off of the summer into the sunset. You know, Birth of the Blues has this sort of spooky adjacent atmosphere with its synth usage and its reverb guitars. Add to that sort of atmosphere of living in the sunset. A sentiment that sort of gets embodied in the track Summer Every Day, which has this really good kinetic energy that carries that summer sun energy that they do so well. I like that VHS sees them collaborating with an artist I haven't thought about in fucking forever with Electric Six, and creates a really good homogenization of the sort of guitar energy that Electric Six had channeled in the past, at least that I'd been exposed to, with TWRP's brand of synthetic funkery to create a good sort of dramatic sounding track that adds to the atmosphere that this EP's channeling. And I really liked Have You Heard. I thought it was a great song. I love the bass play on there, and I think that it's, again, another really chipper, good tune. If I were to say anything about this, it's that, damn if I haven't actually just wanted more from TWRP. You know, I love this group. I've loved their EP stuff. I love their albums, obviously. I've done nothing but sing immense praises to this band. They were a consistent bit across my Borderlands, the pre-sequel playthrough for Shake's playlist. I love what these guys got going on, and I hope that they expand upon this with more stuff, because I like the atmosphere on parts of this, and I think that when they sort of play the hits as TWRP does, it doesn't miss. It's just an instance, which is the first time in a while that I could say TWRP has left me wanting more.
I'm going to be giving this a 7, and it's not because it's by any means lesser than any of their catalog. In fact, if you want like a nice little appetizer for like TWRP vibes, and you're not all that familiar with their stuff, and you don't want to spin their older stuff, listen to this. It's produced very nicely. I love the production of this. And again, it's good, it's funky, it's energetic, and it just really left me, personally, as a big fan of these guys, wanting more. I know they're doing more. They talked about releasing more soon after this, but man, fucking A.
I love George Clanton's 2019 album Slide so much, I immediately made one of its songs the bumper music for one of my segments. I really loved the way that he sort of melded vaporwave with a little bit more of a 90s throwback sheen, and I like that on Ooh Rapaya, he kind of just plays the hits and continues pillaging down this sonic highway of capturing this weird telescopic view into a world that I find oh so very nostalgic, and bring those ideas into a modern scope. A lot of the lush drum production on here reminds me of the Boom Boom Satellites' first record, and a lot of the ethereal, reverb-soaked ideas that he's channeling on here and adapting from Vaporwave and bridging the worlds of modern Vaporwave from 90s electronic music continues to captivate me. But there's a sense of reflection in that capturing of one's own nostalgia that cements this listener within this old, bleak mindset that I feel like another record that I'll be talking about here shortly also channels. But unlike that album, this stays within the realms that I kind of go to George for by and large. I love the sonic palette of this thing, but that should be no surprise to anybody that knows a lot of the aesthetics and niche pockets of music that I tend to really hold up as some of my personal favorites. The beat on Punching Down sounds like something I would have heard in like a trip-hop album in 1997, and I fucking love it. The beat switch up on Vapor King Subreal is sublime. The way the synths meld with another trip-hop style beat on the closer For You I Will puts me into this serene headspace that I find myself coming back to every time the record resolves back to this point. While I enjoy a lot of the dreaminess that this record does have going on in its circles, there are a couple of tracks where I kind of wish they built to a little more of a deeper resolve.
A shining example is the track You Hold the Key and I Found It. While I love the production of that track and I think that it has this nice realm that it sits in sonically, by the end of it I've always just kind of felt like it needed a little something else, you know. It felt like it had a nice thing that it had going on, but it felt like it needed a little more to kind of build to. It needed a nice chef's kiss of itself, you know what I mean?
But a lot of those complaints I have are nitpicks that I can almost cast aside, because by the by, while this record is very tight and in and out with its presentation, it also makes it a much more of a re-listenable experience to me. I like a lot of what this has going on, but are any of you really surprised given the types of stuff that I typically like in this lane? I'm giving this a 9. This is a strong contender for being on my top 10 of the year. I fucking love the atmosphere of this. I love the vibes, and I think that as far as keeping a tight, consistent project together, George Clanton did it again, my guy.
Do you wanna be mine? Wanna be mine?
Boy Jr.'s Pay Attention to Me was my introduction to their brand of sort of independent DIY style, synth-driven music. And on this follow-up EP, Sheesh, they do a good job at sort of giving a snapshot look at some real intimate ideas, both with their own interpersonal relationships and their own identity, in a way that I think is explored very fucking well. With production that sort of feels like a upgrade in some instances that they like to integrate into their sounds even more harmoniously with these electronic backdrops, and have some great moments within. I love the climax that Oh God, I've Got a Crush finally culminates to, and it lets that sort of euphoric rush on getting a crush feel fully realized. I love the joy on a track like I Love My Friends as well, that just sort of celebrates camaraderie in the best way possible. I also like that the snarkiness from Pay Attention to Me isn't lost on Your Loss, a track that still has a nice, really good groove that sort of takes a lot of the ideas that this record kind of champions of self-discovery amidst, against, in spite of anybody else in the world, and turns it towards the opposition in a very positive way, even with its snarkiness. I also like that the closer, Shapes and Colors, kind of has this eye-opening from within moment that sort of describe how you feel about yourself as a person in a really good metaphorical way. I think that it's a well-written song, and I think that honestly, as far as like the Boy Jr. songs I have sampled, it might be up there with one of my favorites. I like this though. I like this a lot, and I hope that they continue to sort of pillage forth in this direction and find ways to sort of experiment and integrate these ideas as seamlessly together as they do on here. I'm giving this an 8. I like this a lot. I think it's really fucking good. I've given every EP this month pretty high adoration, but as far as, again, giving a nice sample size of some artistic progression and growth, Sheesh is a good version of that, in my opinion.
Driving drunk, hoping you get caught, living like you're 19.
I was looking at the end of the month releases, and while there were a couple of albums that dropped that I had a lot of interest in, like the new Slow Dive, I knew if I was going to give any time to anything, it was going to be the follow-up to what was mine and a lot of my peers' album of the year in 2020. Spanish Love Songs, No Joy. I still get a lot of spins out of Brave Faces Everyone. I think that it's an incredibly emotionally potent record that uses its emo music influence to accent some really strong songwriting that showcases reflections on aging at a time when it feels like you should have things figured out beautifully. And I think that the time that it came out couldn't have been more perfect. On No Joy, they see themselves in sort of a sonic pivot of sorts. Well, since we're kind of in the tapestry of Brave Faces Everyone, they definitely take more of a focal forefront in aspects of the sonic palette on here. And I don't necessarily hate that, but I do think that it sort of diverts some of the mood that was so perfectly channeled on Brave Faces Everyone into a little bit of a lesser unity for me. I still love this album. I still think that it's very, very strong, and that songwriting doesn't falter whatsoever. That same picturesque writing that I love from Brave Faces Everyone still finds its way coming up here, like on one of the singles on here, Pendulum or Cleanup Crew. I'm Gonna Miss Everything has that same bleak feeling cemented that Brave Faces Everyone did have, but that's a perfect example of like the new sonic style sort of detracting from that emotional potency, in my opinion. While I don't think that the synthetic coding on that track is terrible, it's just not quite the mood that I'm getting from the lyrics of that song. While I love what the track builds to in its end, I just feel like it kind of comes too little too late. But again, those complaints are like few and far between, because even the moments where they act as more the forefront, like the track that follows up, I'm Gonna Miss Everything, Rapture Chaser, which further sort of explores those topics of aging and looking back on ending up at a place you may not have expected yourself to be at this point in your life, has this great swell in its chorus that I would almost say mirrors those same kind of swells and musical ideas that I think the Killers were championing pretty well on Imploding the Mirage. The track Haunted also kind of captures that energy that I'm talking about pretty successfully, while its lyrics, again, get fucking bleak. That cynicism you're feeling is also partially due to the fact that the world is crumbling around you. While I could see people really taking away from this project far lesser than I'm going to say I'm taking away from it, because, again, that juxtaposition of that sonic pivot with that reaffirmation of those bleak lyrics may be a turnoff for some people. It's not quite as much to me, while, again, I don't think I like it as much as Brave Faces Everyone. I do still really enjoy this. I think that the storytelling, picturesque style songwriting that the band channels just never misses, in my opinion. Mutable is another track where they keep that moodiness intact with some really good hazy guitars. Gives that emotional resolve that I was wanting more from a record like this, and puts it in the forefront in the best way possible. And the way those synths kind of come in above those hazy guitars is a moment where, again, it just kind of harmonizes what they were trying to expand on from what made Brave Faces Everyone just a really strong record. I'm going to be giving this a 9, because even if I don't think it's as good as Brave Faces Everyone as far as harmonizing that sonic palette with those lyrical strengths, it still retains a hell of a lot of what I enjoyed from this band, and I think that the sonic pivot isn't really a misstep. It'll definitely still be in my top 20 of the year. I just don't know how high it'll rank up on the list. But this is definitely one that, especially as the months get colder, even though there's some aspects of this I can see being like a late summer jam, released in a really good time, I will probably be spinning this in the coming months, because it's just still that damn strong. And that was what I listened to in all of August. Did you like these projects? Did you not? Let me know your thoughts on them and anything you'd like for me to listen to in the comments down below. If you did like this video, give it a like. If you want to see more, consider subscribing. I drop 2 to 4 vids a week, depending on what I've got going on. I'm going to go, though. Thank you again so very much for watching. I've been Viral Rack. You guys have good days, lives, and situations. And I'll see you another day.